There are three main motivating factors behind the creation of red-r. First, we wanted to create a platform that gives access to R functionality without needing programming expertise. R programming has a steep learning curve, which prevents many people from utilizing the amazing functionality offered by the extensive collection of R packages. Second, regardless of the ease of use, no software can replace the skills and experience of expert statisticians or data analysts. But often in interdisciplinary teams, it becomes difficult to share data and analysis with others that do not have the required computational skills. We think this greatly reduces the productivity of the group, since only the computational members have access to the data in any meaningful way. Therefore, we wanted to make a platform that would allow experts to perform analysis and create analysis pipelines to share with non-experts. This would free the experts from having to do repetitive tasks and empower the non-experts to perform the regular analysis. Finally, we wanted to extend the functionality of R and offer a more interactive platform for data exploration. So what is red-r? It's a visual programming interface for R. Visual programming hides the code complexity of R behind an easy, or at least easier to understand, graphical user interface. Analysis is performed by linking a series of widgets together. A widget performs some function, like reading, manipulating, or visualizing data, and data is passed between widgets through links. We call a series of linked widgets that perform some task a schema. So let's say you want to perform a simple task. Read some data, filter it based on values in columns, and view the results. In R, you would probably do this in a few lines of code and output the results to a file, and then view the data in your favorite spreadsheet program. Let's look at how you would do this in red-r. We build a schema with 3 widgets. The picture of this schema is pretty self-explanatory. We read a file, pass the data to a row filter widget, which filters the data based on our criteria and passes the subset to a view data table widget. Even with this simple example, the advantages of visually representing analysis pipelines is clear. It hides the code complexity of R behind an easy-to-understand schema and allows people to perform analysis without having to know R programming. The second major advantage is that a visual representation of the analysis pipeline is much easier to understand compared to R code, even for R experts. Lastly, this system allows a rapid way of creating analysis pipelines for repetitive tasks. Now, an R expert wouldn't have any trouble reading the few lines of code in R that perform this task of reading, filtering, and visualizing data. But this visual representation is understandable by almost everyone. We hope that as analysis pipelines get more complicated, this visual representation will still remain understandable and improve data analysis interpretability. Now, for non-experts, performing this task in R would be quite involved, and the learning curve is quite steep. So let's look at how the graphical user interface will hopefully reduce this learning curve in red-r. Let's look at the red-r application. This is the default view you'll be presented with when you first open red-r. The widgets are organized in a tree view in the left panel. The blank area here is referred to as the canvas. This is where you draw the analysis pipelines that will perform some task. You can also search for widgets using the search box. From the tree view, you can click on the read widget and add it to the canvas. We can also search for widgets and add the row filtering widget to the canvas. And finally, since we want to show the data, let's add the view data table widget to the canvas. Next, we can construct our pipeline by connecting the read widget to the row filtering widget and the row filtering widget to the view data widget. To use a widget, double click on the widget icon. This will open up a widget window with all of the parameters and options required to function for the widget. In this case, we're looking at the read file widget, so we need to actually select a file, and you have a drop-down menu of all the files that you've previously selected, and if you haven't selected one yet, you can go to Browse, and it'll open up a window where you can select the file you want to import in. Now in my case, I'm just going to bring in this file that I've previously selected. This was created using Microsoft Excel, so it's a comma-delimited file. So I need to select the comma, and as soon as we do that, we see that in the preview window here, you can see all of the columns, and the first 10 rows are visible here. So I know now that the file is being read in correctly. Now at the bottom panel here, you can see that R has selected the data types for each of the columns, And R does a very good job of this, so I'm not going to mess around with it, but if I thought that one of these columns should have been a factor or a character or something other than an integer, I would have changed it here. And then there's a lot of other parameters that I could use. I'm not going to go through them, but you can mouse over the parameters to get little tooltips that will tell you what these options do. But once we've done that, we can load the file in. As soon as we load the file, we can see that we've loaded this file in, and it has 11,000 some rows and 9 columns. Now, on the right here, you can see that we have 3 boxes that are open, and these are available in every widget in red-r, and they can be hid or opened from these buttons at the bottom. The help will show you some help about the widget that you're looking at. The notes section is something where you can type in notes as you're doing the analysis. So this is to help you keep track of what you're doing, and even more importantly, if you're going to share this type of a pipeline with someone else, to give them an idea of what each of the widgets is doing. And finally, the last box is the R output, which shows the exact commands that are being sent to R that are actually doing the work. So now that we've loaded this file in, we can close it, and the data, since we've connected the read file widget to the row filtering widget, is now in row filtering. So if we open up this, you see something very similar to what you would see in a spreadsheet application. You see all of the columns, and in this case we're looking at the first 500 or so rows. And so for each of the columns you can set the criteria by which you want to do filtering. So let's just do something simple. So in this column X, let's say I want to get all of the rows that have value of less than 10 in this column. So I'm going to add that and hit commit. And close that. And now we can see that the data was filtered from 11,000 rows to just 9 rows. Let's commit this entire subsetting. So when you commit this, the data is passed as a subset from the row filtering widget to the view data table widget. If we open that up, we can actually just see the data as we would in any spreadsheet application. So the last major motivation we had for the creation of red-r was to bring some interactivity to the regular R work that we do. And so to do this, I'll give you one example. Well, let's plot this data as a scatter plot. So we would go and search for our scatter plot widget. There it is. Bring it to the canvas, and let's take our entire data set and put it into scatter plot. So now you're seeing just a blank window, and you get to select what are the X and Y axis supposed to be. So I'm just going to pick a couple of columns for the X and Y axis, and you can see that all the points got plotted here. Now you have functionality for zooming in and selecting these points now in this plot bar. So if you click on the graph somewhere, it'll zoom in, and right click on the graph somewhere and it'll zoom out. So let me see, I just want to see all of these points that are clustered at the bottom here. We can then use the selection widget and say, give me everything that's in this selection, and hit select. Now one of the things that we've done here is that once you've selected a set of points, you can start coloring them differently. And so if you click on the color by points, now you can see that you've done a selection, so some of the points are true and some of the points are false. Let me go back and zoom in on this again. And so you can see now that you've selected 2 different classes of points. Once you've done the selection, you can send this forward and you will see it in other widgets, such as data tables. So let's take another data table and connect it. And now you're looking at some set of points which you had actually selected from the previous one. So this is not showing you all of the points, only the points that were selected from your previous scatterplot selection. So that's a brief introduction to red-r. We hope that red-r will increase the accessibility to R by giving it a graphical user interface, and also improve collaborations between R experts and non-experts by giving them a platform where they can exchange data and analysis.